Here is a pair of stay-on booties that are finished and ready to go. And they're called stay-on booties because they really do stay on. They're the only booties I knit, and I teach the knitting of these booties to my beginner knitters, and once you can understand the techniques, you can be a very good knitter. We will post the instructions along with the videos, and what I'm going to do now is take you through every stage of making them so you have no difficulty when you go to do it. These booties start with a provisional cast on because you want to keep stitches live and going in both directions. Later on you're going to knit that way at the beginning. So although there are several ways you can start knitting provisionally, I like to use the Middle Eastern wrap cast on, and you can see I'll just show you what I'm doing, or you can look at the separate video on that. Putting the yarn between the needles, holding tight. I need 10, but I'm going to do a few extra just so my yarn stays in place, and I also want a little bit of a tail. Okay, having done that, I will rotate the needles, and I'm going to slide the top needle out of the way. Bottom needle will hold the stitches in place, and I'm going to knit 10 stitches. It's a little tricky, but you can master the technique. Do it enough. It's 4, 5, 6. Notice my needles are not parallel, they're askew. That gives me room to break in and knit. Okay, I believe that's 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, one more, 10. Now, because we are knitting the bottom of the bootie back and forth in garter stitch, I'm going to turn the knitting around. Pull out my unkneaded needle. These wraps will eventually fall off. I'm going to turn around and I'm going to knit. Now this row I will knit all the stitches except the last, and I will purl the last stitch. So I will knit the first to get started. That looks a little big, but I'll pull the tail and take care of that. 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, whatever technique, I'll just purl this way. Okay, second row is done. I'm going to turn around again, pull that tight. Now, from now on, in order to keep a braided selvage, we're going to slip the first stitch and purl the last. Whether you slip it knitwise or purlwise, you do get a different effect. You could try it and see which way you prefer. At the moment I prefer slipping purlwise. Sometimes I prefer doing it knitwise, but I'll do it purlwise. Okay, so now you're going to knit back and forth, slipping all first stitches and purling the last stitch. The reason we're doing this is it will give us a braided selvage. Okay, now again, you knit and purl the way you want to do it. I'm doing the Norwegian style because it's so efficient. Making sure I'm not splitting that yarn. Do that again. Okay, pull that tight. I'll do one more row and then I'll show you what it looks like when you've done all your rows. You might notice I'm using quite a thick yarn and rather small needles. These booties are best when knit firmly, so I never pay attention to what the yarn might say about size of needle and gauge. I just knit my booties firmly. They're like little boots, and you want them to hold their shape. Okay, so I'm going to knit back and forth until there are 19 ridges on both sides. You can see we're starting to get the braided selvage. There's a braid here and a braid on the other side, and now we have 2 ridges here, 2 ridges here. We will keep on going, but I'm not going to bore you with that. This is how it would look when you're done. I'm showing the samples in a variety of yarns so you can see what a variety of booties you can make, all with the same pattern but with different size needles and different yarn. This bootie is made with a sock yarn doubled. And here I am now. I've got my ridges mostly all knit, and I'll show you the next step. What we need is 19 ridges on both sides, and you'll have to believe me when I tell you there are 19 on this side and 18 on the other. I have one more row to knit, and I purposely want you to see how I will slip the first stitch, and now when I get to the end I will not have to purl the last stitch. I would just knit the last stitch. So work across my 10 stitches, and at this point we'll have the bottom of the sole done, and we'll have live stitches on both ends. Now, the way I determine it is my beginning yarn is here because of the way I cast on, and now I'm catty corner, and now I am ready to pick up and knit. Turn my work to the side, and I'm going to pick up and knit, and because I knit 19 ridges, I will pick up and knit 18 stitches very easily. And in order to get a decorative trim that shows up on the bottom of the bootie, I'm going to put my needle into both loops of the braided edge, and there's my pick up, there's my knit. And whether you throw it in the right hand or knit it in the left, it doesn't matter. Pick up and knit is the same. There's no needle in the left hand. You just put this in between both, pick up and knit, and I just go right down this edge of the sole, and I should have 18 when I get to the end. And here's what we get. We have a little, see the braided edge? It shows up very nicely. Okay, pick up, knit. I will show you how to do it if you throw, but it's really the same thing. There's your pick up, and then if you're going to knit, you would throw it, and there's your knit. Pick up, knit. And I find works better if you actually say it while you're doing it, especially for beginners. So you say pick up, knit. And you notice how I'm stretching it with my left hand. You don't have to mince, you know, this is knitting. It's got plenty of give in it. Okay, and I think we need one more. We'll count and make sure. Should have 18, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. There we are. Now we're going to knit across our 10 stitches. The very first stitch works out better if I knit it in the back of the loop. No, you knit it where you need to knit it according to the cast on you did. And knit right across. Your 10 stitches. There's the 10. Okay, pull that loop tight, and now I will pick up and knit 18 stitches along this edge. Now you might think, if you look at the bootie, that I purled a number of rounds and then knit them, purled them, knit them, and so on. But that's not the case. I'm actually going to start with knitting 3 rounds, then purling, then knitting, then purling, then knitting, and then we'll turn it inside out and make it look as if we did a lot more purling than we did. Okay, now here's the other side. My first pickup is right above my beginning. I want to make sure I'm not getting anything more than I need. Pick up, knit, pick up, knit. Up with a different color, but you can't really mistake it. Pick up, knit. Okay, you see I'm going to both sides of that braid, that braided selvage. Pick up, knit. And again, I'll do it till I have 18. Notice the left hand, even though it doesn't have a needle in it, it's doing its share of work by doing all kinds of stretching to get that stitch right through. Okay. Well, let's hope we have 18 here. If not, we'd have to go and do it again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 6. Oh, that was lucky. Okay, if we didn't, we'd have to take it out and grab one stitch there. This is why you don't want to do 18 ridges. It's impossible to pick up 18 stitches from 18 ridges. Do 19 and then you've got enough to go on. Now, this point here is beginning of round. I'm going to knit right across the top. And personally, I can't be bothered by putting little pins in to remind me of beginning of round. What I like to do is I like to take the tail, put it right up here, hang it over a little bit, and then that little tip there reminds me, when I get up to this corner, that's my beginning of round. And I'm just going to knit 3 rounds. I just did the first 10 stitches. I'll go down the side, knit these 18 and go around for 3 times. Now rather than have you watch me do that, trust me, I'll do it. But I'll show you the next set. Rather than have you watch me knit that whole 3 rounds, here we are back with what you saw at the beginning with the other half of the pair of booties. And you can see I've knit my 3 rounds. And you know, you can count them. Pull it and stretch. There are 3 rounds. You don't have to count here, but count on the sides and you see them. And I'm back at my starting point, which is my thread hanging over. Now, theoretically, well not theoretically, what the pattern tells you is you're going to purl 3 rounds, but I am very lazy and I don't like to purl. So instead of purling, I do a little trick called wrap and turn. So my yarn is in the back, I'm going to wrap it around the next stitch. And then I'm going to turn my work, and instead of knitting 3 rounds, purling 3 rounds, I'm going to knit 3 rounds. So I have 3 more rounds to knit, and then I'm going to wrap and turn again and wrap and turn again until I have a set of 5 welts in my section, which are 3 knits and 2 purls, but I'll just go ahead and do a little bit. Now my video guy, Dave, he's itching for me to tell you that he doesn't turn around and knit, because he likes, at that point, instead of purling, he likes to knit backwards. And I'll tell you, it works, and his work looks beautiful. So if you like to knit backwards instead of purling, it's only 3 rounds. It's a very good way to teach yourself how to do it in a very limited time you'd have to do it, so feel free to do that. Me personally, I'd rather just wrap and turn. But wrapping and turning does create a little bit of a disturbance, and I will show you how you fix that up later. But for now, you can see, it looks like I'm purling, at least, you know, one side looks knit, now it looks like I'm putting purls in, depending on your point of view. But I would do this for 3 rounds. But rather than have you watch me do it for 3 rounds, I'll just show you the next set where it's already been done. I'll go ahead and finish 1 round. Now, you notice I'm knitting Norwegian style. It's only because it's convenient to me. You knit whatever way you want to knit. Now, here I am at my wrap and turn. Now, you know, sometimes you read about wrapping and turning. They tell you to take that wrap, put it on the needle, and so on. But here you don't have to, because it blends right in with your bumps from the previous round of knitting. So you don't have to do anything with that wrap for now. Later on, you will have to deal with the wrap. And I will tell you a little secret. When you are knitting in this technique, when you start your 3rd round, now I'm on the 2nd round, but when I go around and start my 3rd round, which would start here, because I'm going in that direction, I would knit the first 7 or 8 stitches quite firmly. So if you can remember in every set that you're doing to knit the first few stitches of the final of 3 rounds firmly, it will benefit you later, and you will see why. Okay, I'll stop here. But I would be knitting 3 rounds before I wrapped and turned again. And you understand how I wrap and turn. Okay, I'll stop here and we'll go into the next stage. So now I have my welt section completed. It consists of 5 segments, and I'll read it the way it looks, even if I didn't knit it that way. But there's my 3 rounds of purling, 3 rounds of knitting, 3 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl. And our wool is at the top where our little marker is. Here's our beginning of round, which I can now pull out because I really don't need it. I will work that into later. Now we're going to work across the top of the bootie, this part, to form the instep. Now, I'm going to work across in stockinette, and so here I am. I have to purl across these stitches, and when I get to my 10th stitch, I'm going to purl 2 together, this one and that. Well, as you know, I'm a lazy purler, and I will do what my video guide does voluntarily for rounds at a time, and I'm going to purl backwards or knit backwards, depending upon your point of view, what you call it. Before I do that, I will take my first of the 18 stitches and add it to my 10 stitches so that I can purl 2 together without stopping to fuss. So now my top will have 11 stitches, and I'll have 17 on the side, and when I get across, I will just purl those 2 together. Now again, you can just purl together normally. I prefer to do it backwards, and here I go. So here's my first stitch. We do have a video on how to do this, but I'll do it slowly. You know, this is what it would look like if you were looking at it from the purl side, so I'm not really doing anything different, just approaching it from a different way. I'll do all the stitches so you can get a good look. And when I have 2 left, I don't have to count. When I have 2 left, I'll put those 2 together. Okay. See, if you're looking at it like a purler, you would just see, you know, from the front, you would see I'm doing exactly what you would do. This is a good, I'm not doing this as a trick. I'm doing this as a very handy technique. But it's a good trick to show uninitiated knitters, and it often impresses them. There's my purl 2 together. Okay, now I'm going to knit back because it's stockinette, so we want all our bumps to fall to the inside. And when I do, I'm going to SSK my last stitch to the first stitch here. So before I get started, let me take that last stitch and add it. And because I know that I'm going to do this a number of times, in fact, I'm going to do it 7 more times, I am going to stop right now and I'm going to put 7 stitches on this needle. That way I won't have to stop and do one at a time. And as you knit these booties, you'll find it much more efficient to do it like this. So 3, 4. Okay, now I'm going to slip the first stitch, and this time you do have to slip it purlwise. I'm going to knit across till I have 2 left, and I'll SSK. Okay, and now I'm going to purl back, but before I do that, I will put 7 stitches on this needle so I can just work back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to count and make sure there's 10, and boy, I'm in trouble if there's not. 2, 4, 6, 8. Well, there are 10. Now I'm going to slip the first stitch. Now again, I'm purling backwards, but I'm going to slip it purlwise with my yarn in the front, and I'm going to knit until I come to one before the hole. Because now you see there is a separation between my side stitches and my top. And as I approach it, I'm going to plan to just purl those last 2 together, the one before the hole and the one after. And I'm basically going to go back and forth, eating up the side stitches until they're all consumed. And again, you don't really have to count, you just have to pay attention. This yarn happens to be a very nice alpaca silk blend. I'm knitting it on size 0s for a nice little newborn baby. Okay, so now this is my purl 2 together, making sure I'm not losing anything. And we'll review that once more. I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in the back, because I'm knitting now. Knit across, and again I'm going to knit till I get to one before the hole. There's my hole. Now I'll just mention, some people like to do an SSK by slipping the first stitch to knit, the second stitch to purl. And when I'm doing the booties, I actually like that better. Not that it really matters. It depends on your knitting whether you use that or not. Okay, now I'm going back to purl. 1, 2. And when I get to the one before the hole and the one after, I'll purl 2 together. But to show you one more set so you really can see what's going on. What I love about making these booties is I'm making a miniature sculpture, a little piece of sculpture, with simple tools and simple materials. And when I'm done, I have a nice little 3D piece. Okay, here's my purl 2 together. Okay, again, I'm going to slip it, knit across. Okay, now one before the hole, one after. On this side is an SSK. Now slip 1 is to knit. Slip 1 is to purl, which means really do nothing. Knit 2 together from that direction. And go back and knit. Well, knit back backwards. Knit back backwards, purl back backwards. It depends on your point of view. The point is, when I'm done, the top of the bootie is stockinette. And I didn't have to turn around to purl. Here we are, we're finishing up our little instep. I have 1 stitch left on the right and 1 stitch left on the left. Now, you know, there has been a hole every time I come across, and I close the hole by knitting 2 together, or actually purling 2 together. But now I'm on the very last one, and I'm going to turn, and there's going to be a hole. There's definitely going to be a hole, and I'm not going to come back and purl 2 together. So if I were now to just continue and go across as I have been, we would have a heck of a hole right here. So I'm going to do a little technique called wrapping, and I'm going to wrap this yarn around the next stitch, and that is going to help close up a hole that would have been formed. So I just transfer the stitch to my left needle, let the yarn go around it, put the needle back on the put the stitch back on the needle, on the side needle, and now that stitch is wrapped. And now I'm going to go across, and this time I will knit that first stitch. I have been slipping it. Now notice I said wrap, I didn't say choke, so I'm not pulling that stitch real tight. Now there's another hole at the other side, as you know, and I will close that hole by doing an SSK as we have been. This yarn does want to split, but it's beautiful yarn, and can you imagine a brand new baby wearing these little booties? Imagine it. I've made quite a few with this yarn already, and it is a very nice way to start a baby off. Okay, so here we are, and now here's our hole, and we're going to SSK, and I'll slip one as to knit, keep the other one the way it is. Now this one I don't have to compensate for because I've closed the hole, and now I'm going to continue knitting around and around.
We interrupt this tutorial for an important message. Hello there, this is David Terez's techie guy, video guy, internet guy. During the editing process, an important step made its way to the cutting room floor. At this point, before Terez shows you how to begin the cuff, you need to do the following as directed on the bottom of page 4 of the pattern. Now you've just knitted the last stitch of the instep. Knit the next 2 side stitches. You'll have now 12 stitches on that double point needle. Knit the next 8 side stitches on a fresh double point needle. Add 4 stitches from the next needle. 12 stitches total on that double point needle. Knit the next 15 stitches on another fresh double point needle. With the tip of the right hand needle, place the wrap, which we just came to, on the left-hand needle along the stitch it wrapped. Knit the stitch and the wrap together through the back loops. There are now 16 stitches on that double point needle. Knit across the 12 top of foot stitches. And that is the part that was missing. We now return you to Terez and Verso, who is going to show you how to knit up that cuff.
So what I would have shown you on that is I would have knit around 3 times before starting my little round of holes. And I would have shown you when I got to the wrap, I would ignore it and keep going. Now we do have a loose section here, and later I'll show you how to tighten that up. Okay, we are ready for our eyelet round that we will use later to put our string through for the tie. That's why we have to make the eyelets. Now my directions say knit 3 rounds, but lately I've been knitting 4 rounds. And that's up to you. You try the booties on the baby, see if you want the eyelet round a little bit higher, you decide. I'm lately thinking 4 is better, but I'm not quite sure, so I left it at 3. You decide. Okay, now the eyelet round, knit 2, yarn over, knit 2 together. And I'm going to do this all the way around. Knit 2, yarn over, knit 2 together. Knit 2, it's my yarn over, you know, knit 2 together, a little cozy, a little tight there. Knit 2 together. This yarn is a Elizabeth Labloid. It's a wool silk, and I think it has a little bit of nylon in it. And again, with very small needles, makes a nice little bootie for a little one. Knit 2, yarn over. Knit 2 together. I have arranged my stitches in multiples of 4. I have 12, 12, 8, and 8 because it accommodates my 4-stitch eyelet pattern. Knit 2, yarn over, knit 2 together. Knit 2, yarn over. Now, let me warn you, you might be going along here thinking you're done when you get here, but no, you've got to do the top part of the bootie too. You don't want to get to the end of your booty and realize you forgot a couple holes. So sure enough, here we go. This is the last eyelet needle. Knit 2, yarn over. Knit 2 together, knit 2, yarn over. Knit 2 together, knit 2, yarn over. Now you've seen the whole thing. Excuse the pun. Okay, now I'm going to knit around and I'm going to arrange my stitches so I have 10 per needle. And actually I'm going to start that by adding 2 here because this is a 12 stitch needle. So now we have 10, which is what we want. We want 10 on all our needles, and this puts us very neatly in the back. So just for your information, our beginning of round is right here in the back of the booty, and it doesn't really matter because you're just going to knit around and around for another 22, 23 rounds, but you would end the knitting in the back. So now I have 8 on this needle, and notice I'm just knitting those yarn overs. That's what gives us a nice hole. I'm going to take 2 off this needle to make 10. That leaves a 6 on this needle. I'll take 4 off the top needle. And everybody's happy. 10, 10, 10, and 10. And we'll just keep knitting until you can count 22 rounds plus the ones on the needle. I'll show you that on another booty. But before we do that, let's take a look at where I wrapped and turned and clean up those areas because they don't look so hot. Okay, let's take the wrap and turn here that we did over here. See how loose that is? So I'm going to pull up this, and now I'm going to work my way down by grabbing the stitch here and then grabbing the other side of the stitch here. And notice I'm pinching it with my thumb because I don't want anything to be lost on that side. And I'm just going to go in here, pull up both sides of the stitch, and ease it in. Now the reason I knew that would ease in so nicely is that when I was knitting my final of the 3 rounds, I made sure those last few stitches on that needle were knit firmly. And see, that just eased it right in. Now let's go back to our wrapping and turning section here, and look at that. Whew, what a mess. We have to ease them in this way, this way, this way, and this way. And I'll just get started with you. You can see a big hole there. Take the tip of your needle, pull it up. Now, my video guy is smirking because when he does his purling backwards, he doesn't have to repair anything. But I'd still rather repair than purl, even purl backwards. But again, because I knit the first few stitches of my 3rd round of each set of the welts firmly, I have nice room to work that in. So I'd work that in, probably work that one in a little more. The real trick is to get the right side of each loop. That's really where you can hide that excess yarn, that side of the loop. And you just don't neglect to pull that up. And go down as far as you have to. It's usually just a few stitches. Okay, now I will work these later, but you don't have to watch the painful process. But when it's done, nobody knows you've been there. Okay, you can just do a really nice, it just can look very nice and nobody has to know that I cheated on my purling. Here's another set. Okay, so to me it's worth the trouble. All right, now we'll proceed to the top of the booty. Okay, so now I have done my 22 rounds and I'm ready to cast off. Now, here's how you know you did 22 rounds. Here's one of your holes, and you should do this is your beginning of round here, back of the booty. So at any point shortly after that, you just start counting 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all the way up to 22, and then my 23rd round is on here. And I can tell you the traditional cast off where you knit 2 and pull one over the other and knit 1 and keep pulling one over is not good. It just isn't going to be nice. I like to do Elizabeth Zimmermann's Sewn casting off, and I do it for almost everything. But I particularly do it on the booties. It gives a beautiful edge that just makes that curl perfectly, which you will not get if you use an ordinary cast off. Okay, now first of all, let me make my job easier by transferring. These are 10 stitches per needle. Let me just put 5 on this one and 5 on this one, so I don't have to stop and transfer too often. Okay, now I need, generally 1 inch per stitch, and we've got 40 stitches, but it's fine knitting, so 1 yard is more than enough to work with. And as you get better at this, if you're doing tiny knitting, you'll get to realize you don't need anywhere near a yard. Okay, we're going to start our casting off. Got a blunt needle, one of these nice ones with a curved tip. I'm going to go 2 to the left, keep them on the needle, not going to pull too tight, 1 to the right and off. Okay, 2 to the left, stays on. Okay, now I'm going to do this as one operation. 1 off, 2 on. Now I'm making very sure not to split. And after I do it, I give myself a little jerk to the right. 1 off, 2 on. Pull it, and I'm not pulling it too tight, but I'm still going to just jerk a little, give it a little bit of ease. 1 off. And I tell the beginners in my class and the experienced knitters when they do this, say it aloud. 1 off, 2 on. See, always jerking to the right, so make sure you're not doing it tight. This is a beautiful cast off, and it's in almost any of Elizabeth's books, Knitting Without Tears. You can just look for Sewn casting off, and you can find it. Or you just watch the video and learn it this way. Okay, as you get near the end of your needle, before you get to the last stitch, to make things easier on yourself, keep you from having to think too much, you can stop and transfer the stitches to the next needle, which I will do right now. 1 off, 2 on. Okay, take these and put them on this needle, and then of course I'll just continue. But I think you've seen enough. You don't really need to see me do all that. We'll just go to the next booty waiting here for us and finish up this one. Okay, see that beautiful, nice cast off that just can't wait to roll? Okay, I've got a couple stitches left, and I want to show you how I do the final finishing. All right, this happens to be sock yarn doubled. I'm trying to show you a variety of yarns you can use for your baby booties. I do use cotton even if I'm making them for a baby in the summer or a baby in the tropics. But, generally I use wool or a nice wool blend, but make sure it's a nice soft wool. I have done hundreds of booties, and every time I did a booty, I would try to find a really nice way to join my beginning and end of sewn casting off. And when I would find a good way, then I'd have to remember it, and I think I finally found it. Okay, 1 off. This should be 2 on, but of course there's nothing here. Now here is what I've discovered works. I'll grab this yarn, and I'm actually going to pull that through this. So I'm going to go in here. It's tricky and it's not easy, but it is possible. And my video guy has not let me take my glasses off to do it like I usually do, where I can really see without my glasses, but I'll manage. All right. This is the prize. That is what we want. Put it back on my needle, and I'm now going to go through it this way, and then I'm going to go back through where I just was this way. And as far as I'm concerned, that looks pretty darn good. And now I will show you how to work in your ends. Okay, so you can see the yard I estimated was way more than I needed, so I don't need to work with that much, so I'll cut that. And now I'm going to thread my yarn with a very sharp needle. Now, even if this were like a 4-ply yarn, I would separate the plies to work it in. So I'll just work these 2 in separately. Now I've got a sharp needle, and I am going to start by, now I'm working from the wrong side. You might think it's the right side. you think this is the right side, but it isn't. It's the wrong side because of the curl. So I'm going to pull this here, and I am simply going to follow the path of the stitch, deliberately splitting my yarn. A very sharp needle, and I'll work it like 5 or 6 stitches in this direction, this half of the yarn. And when I cut it, believe me, it will stay in place because this is wool, even superwash wool, which I believe this might be. It's still gonna grabbable enough. Okay, I can cut that off, and I can be safe, assured that that baby will never pull that out. It will not come out. Take the other side, do the same thing, thread it, and now I'll just work, just slip it down, like so, and I'll work in the opposite direction. Get myself a good stitch, and again, following the path of the stitch, deliberately splitting the yarn. Okay, it should be enough. Trim my edges. I have to tell you, I did not make this wonderful pin cushion. It was sent to me by my dear friend Harriet, and it is the neatest thing. Somebody got an old spool and wrapped some felted wool around it, stuck a pair of scissors in, and I just have all my tools here, and it's very handy. Okay, now, you know, there's also a little bit of yarn here from when you started. Well, that one's been worked in, but let me just show you. This one hasn't been worked in, and I would do the same thing here. I would take my plies and I would separate them. You know what, probably doesn't really matter with this, but depending on how thick the wool is, I might separate it. But anyway, the same thing I will do here. I will take my yarn, I will find a nice knit stitch, my sharp needle, and I would just work my end in. Start here, go up here. Usually I do separate it into two, but it doesn't really matter. You just go about 3 or 4 stitches in. You know, and you're skimming so it doesn't show on the other side. Okay, going right in here. Nice sharp needle. Okay, that should be enough. You can trim that. You don't have to worry about anybody pulling that up. Okay, so that's how you work your ends in. Now, we'll talk about attaching the ties. I will show you how to make a tie, but we'll pretend that you know that, and we'll show you how to attach the ties. When I make the ties, I need about 18 inches per bootie, more or less, depending upon the size of the bootie. So I make the tie 1 yard long. Half of a yard is 18 inches. I've threaded it through half of my one bootie, and now I'm going to thread it through the other half. And you know, you can just thread it on a big blunt needle. Start on your center hole. Just go through each hole. This is where you find out if you missed a hole, which of course you didn't because you know what you're doing. Okay. Okay, now, and again, you'll understand how the ties work when I show you how to make them, but for now I'm going to tie it not once but twice because I want to make a nice big knot that's not going to pull through the holes. And because everybody is safely in, I can now cut. I can cut this bit so later on it will fray nicely. Okay, now we want to know how to make both ties the same length on the same pair of booties. So you don't do one and then cut it. You do both and then line up your booties like so. Okay, got both booties here. Stretch them both out so there's as much cord coming out of the back on one as the other. Okay, these guys aren't quite even. You want to make those even. Make them even and make sure you got the same. Okay, now what we need, this way. So now if I just go like that, that's the midpoint, and this is where a clamp comes in handy. You just clamp it, cut it. You have to clamp it because this twisted cord will come apart if you don't. Cut it, and again I'm going to tie each one not once but twice. Take out my clamp. I have a brother who's a carpenter and a mechanic. He says you can't have too many clamps. That applies to knitting too. Can't have too many useful little tools. Okay, now you might think the booties are done, but they're not. You've got to wash them. Once you wash the booties, you get rewarded by little frays that happen to the ends. Wash them and dry them, wash them by hand, and then give your knitters instructions on how to wash them. I will flip this over and you can copy me if you wish. Turn it. Basically, you wash the booties like you wash the baby. Gently, with a gentle soap like a baby shampoo or dishwashing liquid. And whereas you would towel dry the baby, what you can do with these is roll them in a towel, stamp on them, kind of shape them into place, and air dry the booty. But make sure you don't air dry the baby. Okay? And they are worth the trouble of hand washing because they're very nice. Now, I will show you how to make the cord, but before I show you that, I just want to kind of give you some more tips. Well, generally, it takes about 100 yards of yarn to make a pair of booties. But you might be wondering, do you have enough to make a pair of booties after you've made booties, or do you have enough to make the other booty? So I invested in a tea scale from Upton Tea Quarterly, and you know, I get my teas from here, and I'll tell you the tea scale is the best thing. If you're a tea drinker, weighing your tea makes a lot of sense. So I really got it to weigh out the tea, but the added benefit is it weighs small amounts of yarn. So here's a little booty with enough cord for a pair of booties, and let's just see if I have enough here to make another pair. You put it on the scale, and I have it set for grams, and this weighs 9.7 grams, and this weighs 37 grams. So you know I've got enough for 4 more booties right here. That's a help. Now I'll just tell you, I was making booties from this wonderful merino from South America, and I made booties. I was making them, you know, for a big kid, so they're nice and large. And after I made them, I weighed them out. I kind of had to put a little perch on my scale, but anyway, I was able to weigh them, and I saw I didn't really have enough for another pair. So I knew to make the second pair from the same ball of yarn to make the same booty with a smaller needle and a tighter gauge, and then I did have enough. So when you have a question about how much yarn you need, use your scale to weigh it out, and then you also can make a great cup of tea. That's my tip for the day about tea scales. So we have now reviewed how to make the booties from the very cast on, the very beginning, and right through to the end. And I will show you a pair of booties that is most gratifying. I have a nephew who's in college now, but before he was born, I made him booties from the tiniest size to this size, and here is the end of the booty. He wore these until he couldn't wear them anymore. And these were knit with cashmere, and when that little kid, when he first put these on, my sister said he was pulling up his feet like a marionette and just discovering how he could make his feet jump up and down. And it was kind of nice for me to see that he wore them until he wore them out. So you might say, well, why not keep making bigger and bigger booties for him? Well, at this point, the way to make a better booty as a kid is growing is to make Elizabeth Zimmermann's Add a Booty. This is still a very small one. It probably fit the same kid wearing that. As a matter of fact, I made him many booties, you know, a little bit bigger, in different colors. And he would be wearing one color of booty and bring the other pair to his mother saying he wanted to wear a different color for the time being, so she'd have to change him. But you can make Elizabeth Zimmermann's Add a Booties in all different sizes, and you can keep adding soles on as you need to as they wear out. So you graduate from stay-ons to Add a Booties. This is where you find the directions. Elizabeth Zimmermann, Knit One, Knit All. And here are some wonderful Add a Booties in this book with the directions intact. And this is a pair that is knit doubly. It's got 2 layers with, as you can see, the blue layer added on. But basically you're going to knit 2 booties, knit a little cuff to join, and as you wear out the booties, add on your cuffs. You can make them up from a 1-year-old to a giant, and you will always have wonderful slippers for your feet. Okay, I will show you very quickly how to make twisted cord, but I'm not going to make it in the lengths that you need for the bootie. For the bootie, you generally need 1 yard of completed cord, which means you start with 5 yards. You start with 5 times the amount you need, because the first thing you do right away is to fold it in half and to double it. So already you've lost half your yardage. I'm just using a small piece of pearl cotton here. Now, you're going to lose more in the twist. So I'm going to let my video guy hold one end, and I'm going to start twisting. Now you're going to be working with 5 yards. Okay, and you can buy these tools. I'm sure you'll get a reference. Video guy knows everything about where to get everything. He's also the computer guru. You twist it till you've over twisted it, and you can test it by holding it and seeing if you like the way it looks when it's lax. So you do like it. You take your cord, grab your other end, and just let it spin. Okay, take that off. Okay, here is a twisted cord. Now, of course, this is not good for bootie, but it's good for something. And it will stay twisted until unless you, if you tie a knot, but if you don't secure it, it will untwist. So if you're doing it for your booties right away, you would do the special knot I showed you, doing it once and twice because you're making a big knot. Now, pretend this is now 1 yard long and you'd have enough for your booties. You would trim this end. Now you might notice I have some candy cane cord here. This is one of the rewards of teaching. I showed my students how to do this, and one of them turned right around and told me she does it to all her booties because it adds that pizzazz. So she taught me that that's how I should do it. And here's how you would make that. So you need 5 yards again, but now you would do 2.5 yards in each color. And you overlap one color with the other. You knot one end. You have your video guy hold the other end, or your husband. It does help to have husbands around when you're doing this. And again, I'm going to reel it in. Elizabeth Zimmermann explains in her Knitting Without Tears how to do it. She was using her husband's drill. In the old days, they had drills that were not electric, and you could do it, but now they've got a little tool that works the same way. All right. So now I'm going to hang this in the center, grab my other end, thank you. All right, go right for the center, let her rip. Voila. There's your 2-cord twisted color, and you can add that to your booties. Just make sure you got the right length. If your yarn is thin, don't hesitate to double it up before you start twisting it. You don't have to use just one strand. You can use double or triple. You know what you're doing. You don't need me to tell you that. Again, if you were going to tie it, you would tie it twice, make a nice big knot, trim your edges, and put it into your bootie. Okie doke.